Are you comfortable dealing with conflict and disagreement?
Or do you try to avoid conflict at all costs? Today's topic: how to turn conflict into an opportunity for growth.
Welcome to the Influencers Journey Show. My name is Suzanne Hart.
And I'm Taria Hodge.
And the big question is, how does the average entrepreneur like us start with limited time, zero marketing budget, and little to no online presence, get their authentic message into the marketplace and become a person of influence?
And also, what skills must you learn? And most importantly, who are you required to become to magnetically attract your divine client and build a loyal following? Great morning, Suzanne. How are you, my dear?
I am well. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's one of my favorite topics because it was probably one of the topics that caused me the most distress when I was younger. I was like, oh my gosh, conflict, run to the other side, run for the hills, hide out, stop talking. So,
Yeah, so I'm really excited to unpack today's episode, because for me, when we were working through it and we came up with the title, I was just like, ooh, I never thought about it this way. So as I take a look at conflict, one of the things that came up and it reminded me of is our work together, right? And I know some of our super achievers out there, they're like, what? Wait, what do you mean? Working together? There's conflict?
oh
Yes. There is conflict. And one of the things that came up for me when I take a look at conflict, I became aware of my tendency to avoid. So that's how I deal with conflict. I'm like such a don't like any of it. So the thing is to run in the opposite direction, like really quickly, because I don't like it. It's very uncomfortable. And then I also learned that what I also have a tendency to do is to make up stories about what the actual conflict means.
yeah.
Stories that aren't even true, aren't even there. I go into my head about it way, 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 too much. So I am super glad that we have the opportunity to sit down and unpack this conversation for our super achievers this morning. So what about you?
Well, I'm going to look at my past and say my belief system about conflict, because
Mm,
of my household and probably the area I grew up in, was that conflict was loud,
mm,
aggressive, sometimes violent. There was always a winner. There was definitely a loser, and the weaker person tend to lose the battle. So, needless to say, I was like, I'm not having any of this.
mm,
So, when conflict happened, I would disappear and hide out till it was over. And if I was involved, my thing was silence
mm,
and agreement.
mm.
Hence, I ended up bottling and holding a lot of stuff. And I had lots to say, Tria, but I'm not saying anything.
Ah,
And so I would move through the world, and as most people already know, if you've been following me, not saying much while I had lots to say, but having a lot of
yeah.
emotions around it. What I didn't realize was my emotions were spilling out in other ways,
Ooh.
other behaviors.
Mm.
Maybe a little passive aggressive, maybe a little attitude, maybe a little withdrawn, all those things that happen.
A little bit or a lot?
Well, it would depend on the situation. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes it's a lot. However, in your mind, it's a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not on the other end of the receiving, but in my mind, it was a little bit. But we
Mhm.
all know what that feels like when someone's like, you're going, what's wrong? And they're like, nothing, I'm fine. And you're just like, you are not fine. And they're like, no, I'm fine. And it was that dance because I was
Mhm.
afraid of what would happen if I spoke my truth.
Yeah.
And so part of it was really beginning to do the work around conflict. Now, Tria, I'll have to tell you, my confrontation with conflict was my first day of work. So everybody knows I have a social service background,
Mhm.
family, individual, and group counseling. So I get taken out to the family that I am going to kind of inherit, transfer to me
Mm-hmm.
from another worker. So we arrive. Dad is hanging out the window of the house,
Ooh, that
naked,
can be good. That can be good.
naked, and cussing at me, like yelling and screaming and daring me to come in his house. And I'm standing there frozen. And all that was going through my head is school did not prepare me for this. They didn't tell me that this was going to happen. Oh my gosh. So we get in the car and we leave. And I get
Mm-hmm.
back to the office and I keep thinking, I have to go back there. I got to
Mm.
deal with this man. I got to go back there. And that began my journey
Wow.
of having to give this thing called conflict a new definition. Now, I ended up going back there and actually having a great working relationship with this family. They followed me everywhere. No matter what agency I went to, they showed up.
Nice.
No, not nice.
No, that's not a happy ending. I thought it was a happy ending. I'm over here feeling the warm and fuzzies.
It isn't because you want to actually families not to need you, right? So, but they showed up everywhere I went, and they would always want to work with me. So it was it was adjusting my thinking.
Okay. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, so yeah, like I said, it's going to be such a great, conversation around this because I think a lot of things came up for me as we were preparing for the show and how I hold conflict and what I actually think conflict is. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, let's just get ready to jump right into it. Let's not keep our super achievers in suspense anymore.
All right. So hello everyone. And as you join us, as you jump on, please let us know where you are hailing from, what part of the world. Also let us know your name, what you do, who do you serve, and what intrigued you about this conversation. If you got questions, put them in the comment section and comment. Get into the conversation. We're the host and we're having a conversation, but we're actually having a conversation with you. So definitely join us. If you are listening to the replay, hashtag replay and do the same thing. Let us know who you are, what you do while you're living, who you're called to serve, and what brought you out, and continue to comment. We will go back and definitely read the information trio. Why is it that we ask people to light up the comment section?
Yes, because one of the things that we absolutely love to see, we love to see the virtual networking that happens when we are live on the show. So nothing beats having our super achievers weigh in with their thoughts, weigh in with their comments and everything. So I say all of this to say, if you know of another super achiever who could benefit from this conversation today, I want you to take a minute, look below the video, and hit that share button. Share it and invite another super achiever into the conversation. And also, even if you're not on here with us today at this moment and you catch us on the replay, do the same thing. Add your comments, hashtag replay, and then we'll be sure to connect with you as well.
All right, so let us get this party started. So if you're just joining us, welcome back to the Influencer's Journey Show. Today's topic is how to turn conflict into an opportunity for growth. Now, that's an interesting perspective because most people are like, I'm not sure. I am Suzanne Hart and I'm sitting down with Taria Hodge. So we're going to jump into this discussion. So, what are your thoughts on this thing about opportunity for growth when it comes to conflict?
Yeah, so I've never heard that before. And so when I first heard it, I was just like, that's crazy. But the more I sat with it and I thought about it and I looked at the instances where I have been in conflict and at the end things turned out pretty good. And I was just like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it is an opportunity, for growth. So what came up for me was, wow, how do I focus my mind to look for conflict, because I think this is another great
Mm,
thing, how to look for conflict, because I don't think I recognize conflict every time I see conflict, or every time I'm in conflict.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's how to recognize it, and then once I recognize that I'm in conflict, how to reframe or refocus that it is, a beautiful opportunity to create something new.
Hmm.
So I think this would be such a great place for us to start off and just kind of situate our super achievers
Okay.
today. First, defining exactly what is conflict. So one of the things that I heard you say in the beginning of the show is that when you were younger, conflict for you meant, the big things, the blow up, the aggressiveness and everything. But that's not the only type of conflict that we're in. So, what is the definition of conflict?
That's actually not conflict at all, which is really interesting for people to actually get. Conflict is not that.
Mm,
Conflict is actually a difference of opinion.
mm,
It's really simple. And so for me, one of the things that got me comfortable with conflict was actually the whole process of defining it and actually looking at it and really just playing with it. So what it is the difference of opinion. So
mm,
you have an opinion, I have opinion. That's what it truly is. You have a belief, I have a belief, and they are different.
mm,
They are opposing. Now, what really got me was that when I wrote my book, Leading with Character, I put the scenario that my son comes down the stairs and I'm making eggs, and he says he wants cereal. We are
mm,
now in a different opinion, a conflict. But I don't see it as a major thing, so we don't define it as that.
mm.
And I go, sure, grab some cereal. I'll just continue making eggs for everybody else. Not a big deal. But it's a difference of opinion. Or how many times have you had an opinion, someone else had an opinion, you had a great juicy conversation?
Mhm, mhm,
You're in a conflict. So part of it is conflict is just two opposing opinions. Now, what got me, Sharia, to really understand this was I had to get away from right or wrong,
mhm,
right? So I'm right, you're wrong. And I had to get away from good or bad and just be, oh, these are two different
right,
opinions. Now, the other thing that we talked about, and I realized as I began to dive into it, is no change, no growth, no transformation.
mhm.
Actually, nothing happens without conflict first.
Yeah. And it's so true, because like I said, I never looked at it from this standpoint before, but as I was introduced to it, I started to replay different scenarios in my mind. And I look at scenarios in business. Like I said, one of the things at the top of the show, in us, in our working relationship, conflict. But, am I really sitting down and looking at it like, oh, this is conflict? So that things are different. You're of one mind, I'm of another mind, but it's to bring that consciousness to it. And so, and I love what you're saying too. You bring the consciousness to it, and then when you're aware of it, is to not go into the space where right or wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, and then you have to bend to my way, and if you don't bend to my way, then there's this big thing, or make it mean more than it is. All it
Mhm.
is just a difference of opinion. And so I think that that's really such a key thing for people in business to really get, as especially as we sit in the vein of collaborations. So a lot of times, you would hear people say things like, oh my gosh, this collaboration don't work. I won't work. I can't work with this person. I'm having a hard time. But it's, how do they look at conflict, which is, like you said, simply put, just the difference of opinions. And once you understand what it is for what it is, then you could move forward into this beautiful place of growth. So I know for us, when we get a chance to flush things out, we come up with the most beautiful solutions to the things that we're working on, and that's one of the things that makes our collaboration so great, in my opinion, is because I'm not always yes to everything that you say, and you're not always yes to everything that I say. But
Yeah.
because we have different viewpoints, when we come together, we're able to create beautiful things and new things.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of conflict for sure. I want to take it a little deeper, and I want to talk about internal conflict
Hmm.
and interpersonal conflict. So the first one is internal conflict, and we all face it all the time.
Hmm.
And so imagine that you're doing something, or you're asked to do something, and the request is innocent to the other person,
Hmm.
but it stirs something in you, and you are in an internal battle inside yourself,
Hmm.
because maybe what you're being asked doesn't align with your values. Maybe what you're being asked is not something you want to do. Maybe what being asked is challenging for you. And it's the navigating of, why do I have this disruption, that gives us access to growth, change, transformation. Or it could be, I remember when I was working and I was just so frustrated and so dissatisfied. Listen to the words I'm using. So frustrated, so dissatisfied, kind of bored, and it was turmoil. Going to work was turmoil. And it had nothing to do with work. I loved who I worked for. I loved the team. It was, I had outgrown what I was doing. And that conflict inside me gave me access to trying something new.
Mm.
That conflict didn't happen, I would still be in the same place. So when you're in dissatisfaction, you're experiencing internal conflict.
Yeah.
Now what you were talking about was interpersonal conflict. And relationships grow,
Yeah.
expand, change when we're able to navigate interpersonal conflict. So we were talking about this the other day. We had a year last year where it was a lot of interpersonal conflict,
Mhm.
and not necessarily in a bad way, but in an uncomfortable way. The result by the end of the year was new, better, great, all these different things. It was growth.
Yeah.
However, we had to navigate this discomfort, this difference of opinion, this difference of ways of being, this difference of, I'm sitting here, you're sitting there, this difference in terms of, we've outgrown this place, what do we do?
Mm.
All those things through discussion, and our access was growth and change.
Yeah. I love it. And I love that you went back and you defined the personal conflict. And just sitting here thinking about it, how many times do we really experience the internal conflict, but we don't know what to do with it, or sometimes we ignore it. So that the conflict, something is happening on the inside. You might not even get to the point where you're saying, oh my gosh, this is an internal conflict, right? But something is stirring on the inside. And then a lot of times what I find, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, I always remember to speak for myself, you bury it, you push it down, you convince yourself that you could get over it, you could do all of these things, versus taking a look at it for what it is and saying, what is the opportunity for change here?
Absolutely. So that, this is the interesting thing. I know for myself, whenever I am ready to lash out at someone, whenever someone frustrates me, whenever someone angers me, whenever I'm impatient with someone, I remind myself, don't look out there. Ask myself, what's the
Mm.
internal stuff happening here? Because usually I'm in an internal thing. So this is the interesting thing. And this is why conflict is often so uncomfortable for people, and often why we run from it, is that we're stirring inside and we're looking outside. And so we go deal with the person who we think is creating the stirring, where we should be going first is going, why am I stirring? Why am I upset? Why am I frustrated? Why am I impatient? Why am I? Why am I? Why am I? Because until I get clear on that, that conversation out there is not going to be very useful, because oftentimes I'm taking my stuff and making it their stuff. And so part of where we like to avoid conflict is because we're not doing our stuff work.
Yeah.
And therefore we're going in and we're having these weird, awkward conversations where now we're making people responsible for our stuff versus what they're responsible for, or being able to say, this is where I'm sitting and I know you're sitting somewhere else and I need to let you know, because that's why we're having this disruption.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
So I think, like I said, it's the shifting of how we're taking a look and we're holding, the conflict, both
Yeah.
the internal and the interpersonal conflict. And so, talk a little bit about like why this is absolutely necessary. Because like I said in the beginning, one of the things for me when I am aware that I'm in conflict or there is a conflict, my tendency is to avoid.
So I'm going to use an example from history. Um, Rosa Parks sits down on a bus. There's
Hmm.
many interpretations as why she sat down on a bus. Some people say she was tired. Some people said she had enough. Either way, she was tired of the situation. My girl sits down on a bus, right? That sitting down on a bus is an act of resistance. It's a conflict.
Hmm.
The domino effect of her sitting down on a bus is she gets arrested. A gentleman by the name of Martin Luther King gets involved. He's now inspired. He takes on the conflict of her right to sit down on a bus, with the group who says she can sit on the bus, but she can sit on the back. The other group saying I can sit wherever I want. Look at where we've evolved.
Mm.
That turns into voting rights. That turns into a march on Washington. That turns into all these things. So remember, at the beginning we said change and growth can only happen when there's conflict. So what we're seeing is that there's a situation where someone deals with something head on and change happens. We are in an interpersonal relationship, you and I. We have a difference of opinion. We have a difference of where we're sitting in the world. We have a difference on how something needs to be done. If we don't talk that through, we will not have change, growth, or transformation. Let's go to my favorite guys, the Wright brothers. I guess they became dissatisfied with the fact that they couldn't get places, and walking and running and
I was
driving
just about to say they got tired of walking.
that wasn't working for them. A conflict. I want more. I want different.
Hmm.
We fly today because those brothers had a conflict. And I always want to think about, imagine the conflict they experienced as they told the world, people around them, that, yeah, man's going to fly. And people are like, y'all crazy. What do you mean man's going to fly? Man's going to fly. We're going to fly in things that we're going to put up in the air. Yes, it defies gravity. Now, this is the interesting thing. They're also in conflict with reason. They're also in conflict with gravity. They're also in conflict with all these things.
Yeah.
But change can only happen when we face that thing head on.
Yeah.
Think of a fear you have. I had a fear of speaking. I had to face that. I was in conflict. Speak, don't speak. Got a lot to say, but I'm afraid. I want to take the stage, but I don't want to be embarrassed. I have this internal thing going on.
Yeah.
The minute I face it, I grow, change, transform. I become more, and I have access to more. That's why it's necessary.
Yeah. And it's such a beautiful way, like I said, in shifting and reframing it is to now train yourself to really look for the conflict. So are you just glossing over it, or are you taking a look and paying attention to every little thing, because I think what I'm hearing is that conflict is around us like all the time. Like at any given moment, we could be in conflict either within ourselves or against something, an ideal with other people. So, how do you train yourself to recognize that you are in conflict or there's a conflict? And then look for ways, to make it into an opportunity to grow.
Well, I think the first thing, and the language I always use is, how are you holding this word?
Hmm.
So if you ask almost anyone on the planet, what do you think about conflict? They go, ooh, negative. I avoid it. Blah blah blah. That's a reflex
Yeah.
reaction. So that tells you how they're holding it. Well, remember, our thoughts create behaviors. Our thoughts create emotions. Our thoughts create our conversation. So if I'm holding it as negative, I'm going to relate to it as how I think about it. So therefore, I'm going to go into the process of addressing it with this negative tension. It's not going to go well. You know how these things are. They're not good. They're always hard. They're always loud. So maybe the big access here is to change how you hold it, therefore change your definition. So what I did was I said that conflict was neither good or bad, positive or negative. It's not necessarily loud or aggressive. And it's my access to change. That was the place
Yeah.
where I transformed. It was my access to change. It was my access to grow. It was my access to more. It was my access to becoming more. And once I started holding it that way, when I saw or experienced conflict, my question then became, oh, I'm supposed to learn something here. I'm supposed to do something here. Maybe I've been in this place too long. Oh, this is so cool. So now I'm holding it different. My thought is different. My emotions are different. My energy about it is different. And my expected outcome is now different.
Yeah.
And so, because that was the way I started to hold it, one was I had a shift in my thought process around it. Now, even though that happened, Tria, acting on it became still at
Yeah.
times. However, remember, the outcome is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so, because my outcome was positive growth, change versus loud, oh my God, that, when you think of conflict as a negative thing, you can't get past
Yeah.
that thing. I was able to move through it. I became able to move through it because I saw possibility at the other side.
Yeah. I love it. And I love to call that the power of the reframe.
Yeah,
So it's all about how
I like that.
you just reframe it, because listening to it, and I remember when we unpacked it, I was just like, oh my God, I've never thought about it this way. But it's
Hmm.
an exciting way to now take a look at conflict, and when we get into situations, how are we going to hold it? Are we actually looking for the areas where we're going to grow? Now,
Hmm.
I do have to ask this, because I know that there's some of our super achievers out there that are probably saying to themselves, like, yeah, Taria, Suzanne, we hear you, but there's also something else going on here. So you make conflict sound so nice and the reframe is beautiful. But what about this thing that's called confrontation? What about that?
Ah.
And how does confrontation play into the mix of things?
Well, I think the first thing, Tria, is to understand that there's a difference between conflict and confrontation. So when I was writing my book and I was doing the research, I was like, oh yeah, what a powerful distinction. Now, to bring this distinction to light, I want to just tell a quick story. So when I was in social services, I had this amazing mentor supervisor by the name of Joy LePage. And Joy was like my foundation of my growth. She challenged me all sorts of beautiful things. So I am I am a young woman who things just pop out of my mouth. and because I was uncomfortable with conflict, but I was also uncomfortable with the thought of being taken advantage of, or someone treating me wrong, my mouth was like, one of those.
Quick with it. You were quick with it.
I'll get you before you get me. And I remember sitting in her office, and she looked at me and she's like, Suzanne, just because you see something don't mean you have to say something. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I gotta say something. And I remember she said, you need to learn to choose your battles. Now, this is a very powerful statement. You need to learn to choose your battles. You can't be at battle all the time. And what she was saying was, she said, and what she's actually distinguishing for me, there's a difference between identifying conflict and choosing to confront. And this for me was huge, because even in today, even when I see conflict, or I see things that I don't agree with, or I see something that I'm of a different opinion, I ask myself, what's the purpose of confronting here? Am I confronting because I just need to be right?
So that is really good. And I apologize if you were about to say something and I cut across you, but that is so good, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the confrontation part and knowing how to choose the battles. And so how does the act of confronting and not confronting first play in with our our personal conflict? So do we also have the opportunity to choose, when we're in personal conflict, to confront a personal conflict or not to confront?
Oh my gosh. So you go deep, right? You just go in. Okay.
I mean, it came up for me. I was just like, wait a minute. I thought I was tracking the conversation, and I
You
was
are
like,
you're tracking. So this is the interesting thing, is that we always get to choose. We don't always choose, though. So sometimes my emotions will decide for me. So have you ever had an opportunity to do something, but you afraid, and fear chooses the no?
Yeah.
But you don't powerfully choose, so your fear chooses for you. So you choose not to confront the thing that you're afraid of because fear chose. And you walk away and you're still in turmoil because you want the opportunity, but fear chose and said, no, we're not doing this. Then there's the times where you have an opportunity before you, and you go and you think about it, and you go, and it may be uncomfortable, but you still go, that's not the opportunity for me, and you powerfully choose. So, or it's not the right time to confront that fear or that thing. So the beauty about understanding the distinction, choosing your battles, choosing your opportunities, choosing the timing, choosing the person, is this the right time? And remember I said, is it that I just want to be right? Is it that I just want to be in the group? Is it that I just want to have something to say? Is it that I just want attention? Is it that, what is the outcome I'm truly seeking? And is the outcome really worthy of the confrontation? And a lot of times, I know for myself, I can catch myself, oh, you just want to be right. You just want flex. You just want to show off that you know something. Oh, you just want to. It's not going to move anything forward. Other than to one up someone, make you look good, or whatever. I'll say, so we're going to check my ego right now. And we're going to say nothing. That's what my supervisor was teaching me. Girl, check yourself.
Yeah.
So then what you have access to is the times when to confront actually has power and meaning for you or the other person. So, a good friend will confront you for your own good.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, I will deal with you being pissed off at me for the next few days, but I gotta say this because I need to hold up the mirror so you can see something.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away, from this is that the two are absolutely necessary. So first, you have to first be aware, that there is conflict, whether it's within you or within your relationships. So acknowledge that there is a conflict,
Mhm.
reframe it, look for the opportunity. But in order for that to happen, some sort of confrontation needs to occur, whether it's within yourself or with another person. And then also the timing of the confrontation also matters. And so I think when we were unpacking this, to write the show, I looked at the I looked at the two and I said, well, wow, confrontation also has to be this big aggressive thing, and it
Mhm.
doesn't. So how do we, so what's on the table here is how do we actually, I'm pulling for words here, successfully have confrontations or make confrontations work for us, because once again, that's the addressing of
Mhm.
the stuff.
Yeah. So how do you make it work? You choose that it's going to work,
Mm,
right? So whenever I go into confront, I stand in the possibility of this is going to work. Now, what's really interesting, and this is such a huge learn for me, and I'm trusting that it'll be a value for everyone listening, is that remember I said I have to go into it with not that I'm right, not that I'm wrong, not in this place of good, not in the place of bad, not in the place of wanting to get one over on someone, and not in like all that stuff. I got to be able to park it. So in order for me to confront effectively and have it work, I have to do my own stuff first.
yeah.
This is the interesting thing, though. We are conditioned in our society today to talk about win-win, win-lose, win. Okay, and how we interpret that is that someone comes over to the other person's side and there's agreement.
Mm.
This is where things get messy because now the battle is who can come over to you, who can compromise and
Who's going to come to which side?
side, right? And if there isn't, most people say the confrontation didn't go well. Well, no, it didn't go well. Because who wants to give up their opinion, their thoughts, their
Right.
whatever? So for me, it was again redefining what a win was. And so when I go into confrontation, when I go into a conversation where there's conflict, I am going in to express my position and my thought.
Mm.
And what I really want is to be heard.
Mm.
And what I remind myself is that when I'm going into a conflict with someone else, what they actually want is to be heard.
Right.
And what they actually want is for their opinion to be valued. So for me, being able to say my piece and say my position and speak my mind is resolution for me. Now, oftentimes when I sit in that seat, Sharia, and I allow someone to have full self expression, they allow me to have full self expression. Two things happen. We agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
My mindedness might have me hear their opinion. And we've had this happen on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
hear their perspective in a way that I'm like, oh, that's not what I got when you said it. Or, oh, I never looked at it
Mm-hmm.
that way. Yeah, I'm happy to come over to where you are, but you didn't convince me. I heard you and I
Mm-hmm.
heard your perspective. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. I'm over here.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, yeah, I get it, but I don't agree. You get it. No, I don't agree. And we're like, okay, what do we do from here? Not compromise, but how do we make something happen?
Yeah.
Or we just gonna drop this because it's not gonna
Right.
happen. So resolution is not necessarily you come to me, I come to you. It is, can we hear each other well enough for the person to feel valued? Now, this is the thing about conflict for me. When I'm in conflict, I have I have an imbalance inside me, right? And we all know it. We're like,
Yeah.
And if you're Suzanne, your mind is racing and you're pacing.
Yeah.
So
I call that the rub. There's a rub.
You know the way a little bit about my mind. I'm having a full-blown conversation in my head and I'm pacing and I can't sleep. That's usually how it is when it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I know my access to resolving my internal battle is self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
So now I need to make a place so I can have self-expression with the person who who I believe the interaction is creating this disruption. All I'm really seeking is for this disruption to be resolved inside me, is it not?
Yeah.
I'm not really seeking anything other than that. So resolution is often all about us. Remember I said it often don't have nothing to do with anyone else. It has to do with what's stirring inside of me. So when I go into it, I'm really going into it to feel heard. Now, where I have grown, Taria, is I don't necessarily need agreement.
Ooh.
I don't necessarily need to be right, because what I've learned is the most disrespectful thing you can do to someone is to be a right fighter on their opinion and make them wrong. Now, unless there's some things that are wrong. You hurt somebody, they're wrong. But we're usually not in conflict about those things.
Yeah.
We're in conflict about opinions. And my opinion is mine. It's not really all that important in the scheme of things. So for me, it is not to just make my opinion so important that I can't hear someone else. And that's where the access happens to make it go well.
Yeah. It's that respect. That's what I like to term it as, is respect. Because at the end of the day, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Like, that's what we all want. We all want to be respected. We don't have to agree, with everything, but just respect that this is where, I stand, and this is, my opinion, and to be able to give the other person that same respect, as well.
It's interesting because I'm watching some of the comments, Taria, and they're awesome. So one Facebook user is saying better to walk away or try to make a friend, or keep the relationship. And I don't know if that's a question or a statement. I don't not necessarily believe that it's better to walk away. And this is the thing. Remember, I said we got to choose. If it's just me being me, then there's not really, it's my conflict. Has nothing to do about that. And I'm making a real distinction here, because sometimes I can be in conflict. The person stirs something, but it has everything to do with me. It really has anything to do with them. So there's nothing actually for me to go to them with. They just disrupted me and I need to go look at me. When it is internal and we take the position of better to walk away, we're sweeping stuff under the rug that's going to come up at a different time. So my best relationships, my longest relationships, are the relationships where we've learned to express ourselves and not take it personal. It's the relationships where we have learned to hear each other's opinions, how we felt about something, and go, oh, that's not what I meant, or oh. So the maturity of a relationship is actually being able to have conversations about situations where I felt in conflict, they felt in conflict, they felt disrupted, they felt hurt, bruised, or I just didn't like when you did that. Can we have those conversations? So I'm not necessarily in agreement that it's better to walk away, because then you're building a relationship on untruths.
Right.
So I prefer to test the relationship. because my true relationships are a stand for me and I'm a stand for them. And because of that, they're going to hear me and we're going to work through it. A relationship that's not really a stand in my life will get disruptive and walk away.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to sit in the place of, okay, I got to bless and release this, because if we can't be in truth, we're not building a real relationship.
Right.
We're building a relationship that only works when we're in agreement.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I think I want to take a moment to really go back. That's really good. I want to take a minute to really go back though, because I see that there's a question here from Barbara. So great morning, Barbara. Like, how do you deal with the unresolved conflict? So I think this is really good, because it's what it's saying to me is that we're shifting the way how people are holding, the two. So how do you really deal with the things that are unresolved?
And I guess it's really, what do you mean by unresolved,
Hmm.
right? And 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 so I know I have I have situations in my life where we have just agreed to disagree.
Hmm.
So there's not a resolution in terms of you've come over to my side, I've come over to your side. It's just we've agreed to disagree. And to me, that's kind of a place where we're sitting, and that's kind of the place that I've got to accept that that's the resolution that came out of the conversation.
Hmm.
The real question then is, for me, can I have a continued relationship and respect their perspective or where they're
Hmm.
sitting? For some situations, absolutely. And for some situations, not at all. And I've got to own that.
Mm.
And so this is where personal responsibility really gets that place. So I will be very candid. There are places where my mother and I have agreed to disagree because we have different perspectives. In my maturity, I have learned that I can have a beautiful relationship with her, but we don't have to agree on this thing. So when if that comes up, we are going to agree, no, we're not having that conversation, because it's going to be a downward spiral and we're going to be disrespectful to each other as we try to pull each other to each other's side. So we're just not going to have that conversation. We are going to be okay with our disagreement in it. But we can have relatedness in all these other beautiful places. Now, this is the access for me. When I was able to say, okay, that's where she sits over there, accepted, that's where I sit over here, and not make it anything more than that,
Yeah.
it opened the door to all these other beautiful spaces and places where we could be in relatedness.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have a beautiful relationship, because we're not going to be in struggle again in this place. We've just agreed to disagree. So that's one way of dealing with it. I think the bigger question for me is, when there's unresolved issues, it's usually my work.
Mm.
Because remember, a lot of conflict has less to do with the person out there and more to do with me. And so these are the places I often have to look. And we were talking about this a little bit on the mastermind. Am I holding on to a relationship that doesn't serve me?
Hmm.
And that's why the issue is so continuously unresolved. Am I asking someone to be someone other than who they are? Not
Right.
very nice thing to do. Is that why I'm also always in this unresolved place? Am I doing something or participating in an activity that is in conflict with my internal being because I don't want to let it go because the popular people or all my contacts are over here? Still my stuff to decide. So oftentimes when we have an unresolved conflict, it's really we're avoiding taking 100% responsibility for a decision that only we can make, right? I know on this journey, I have had people leave my sphere. We no longer fit because I've grown or we've grown in different directions. Not good or bad, that's just where we are. I've had to let go of things because as I've grown, I'm like, I am no longer committed to that. Let it go. I have had to let go of activities, beliefs, all these things that I've been in conflict with. And until I did my work, they sat as unresolved and they sat as a rub inside me. But once I did my work, I was free of it.
Yeah.
I had to take responsibility for where I was sitting and accept that big word that we were throwing around the other day, accept where I was. It's mine. We always want to make it the other person because truly when we're in conflict in these ways, what it is I don't want to change. So you come over to my side. I don't want to let go. So you come over to my side. I don't want to have to not do this. So you come over to my side. So we spend a lot of time convincing people of their right to believe something different because we don't want to let go. And we don't want to accept their difference.
Yeah. Ooh, good. I just knew it was going to be a juicy conversation.
It's one of my favorites because it is the growth edge, Taria. This is where when we're in conflict, we're actually being oftentimes confronted by who we be in the world and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And there's a rub somewhere, who we're spending time with.
Yeah. Yeah. It like I said, it's one of those things, as you know, I really take it on to look at, how can it be such a fertile ground for beautiful relationships, beautiful opportunities, to just grow.
Oh, there's some doozy questions, Taria. I'm like reading and I'm like, oh my goodness, we got 8 minutes. Maybe we may have to do a part 2 to this.
A part 2?
Because there's some doozy conversations. So what about conflict with a divine client? That's a great question. What happens when the other person does not have the skills to deal with conflict? Okay. Conflict with a divine client. It's, I think it's no different than any other conflict. It is because there's 2 pieces. When someone is a client, I have a responsibility for them, to them. So oftentimes, if I don't deal with the conflict at hand, I'm not sitting in my responsibility. Now, that's if the conflict falls inside my sphere of work. Sometimes it falls outside my sphere of work, and I got to do the referral thing. So that's the first place. If it's a conflict in terms of interpersonal, again, is this your right client? Is this truly a divine client? Because remember, my defining thing for my divine client is not that they need my service per se. That's one part of it. But that we walk through the world with common values and beliefs. And oftentimes when I'm in conflict with a client, a divine client, is that there's a value or guiding principle disruption. And I don't usually work with people where our values and principles are off because we're always going to be in conflict. So it might be that you want to check the principles and values that guide you and your business and say, are we out of alignment? And if you're out of alignment, that person may need your service, but they don't like how you do your service. They don't like how you walk through the world, or you're in conflict how you walk through the world. So that would be the first part. And without more information, that's probably the best I can give. When someone doesn't have the skills to deal with conflict, this is a doozy. This is a great question. My belief is that, and Yetta Decker, if you're listening, thank you for these words. So the person who is the most skilled, the most mature, has the most wisdom, and I'm not using these from a place of judgment, but from a place of where we sit in the world, is responsible to do the work. We do the approaching because we have the skill set. At the same time, I also believe we have a responsibility to model how a great conversation around conflict or confrontation happens. So I will give you another story, and you all gonna learn. You're learning a lot about my personality right now. So again, when I was in social services, Suzanne does not like to be yelled at all. I will shut down and stop listening to you if you start yelling, and that's just my reaction. So I have clients that would yell at me on the phone, and what I would do is I would just put the phone down on my desk, and I just sit there. Now I'm not listening, because remember I told you I don't listen, and I'll wait, and when the phone gets quiet, I pick it up, and they'd say, "And what do you think?"
Did you hear anything I said? No.
And I'd say, I didn't hear a thing you said, because I can't listen when someone's yelling at me. So can you tell me what you desire in a calmer tone? And some people will start yelling at me again, and I'll put the phone down. I'm modeling how we're going to be in relatedness. And eventually, all my clients will start talking to me. And the minute they start to yell, they'll go, I know. Or I'll go, I'm going to give you a moment, and I'll come back. So no matter where I worked, I'd say, you know what, I'll come back when you're calmer. So I would shut down the conversation. So what I'm pointing out to you is that if we're the person better equipped to do this, we also sit in the mature role of modeling how it can be done. I have invariably shut down conversations and said, you know what, I don't work well when I'm being yelled at. I don't work well when people talk to me in a sarcastic, disrespectful tone. So let's shut this down for a moment and come back when we're able to have a better conversation, because I'm committed to resolving this. What I'm not committed to is being talked to in a certain way. So I'm modeling what I desire. What's interesting is people who are committed to resolution will rise to the occasion. People who aren't will just walk away. Remember, I said, I'm committed to who I'm being, who I want to be, and who I want to be surrounded with. So I'm not, they've actually walked away, and they've showed me where they're sitting in this moment. Now, they can come back at a different time and say, you know what, I had time to think about it. I'm ready to have that conversation. Great. We teach people how to engage with us. We teach people how to treat us. We teach people how to be with us. We are required, as a more mature, wiser person in this small situation, to model what we expect and what is better and what is the most functional way to do this. That's the responsibility we have. And because otherwise we're going to get into a downward spiral ourselves and find ourselves in a place. How did I get here? You got here because you didn't take responsibility to being mature.
Right. Yeah. And it's so good because, like, I think that question goes back into doing the work first. So the times that I catch myself like in conflict before going into confrontation is really sitting back, and unpacking it. So, like, really, how am I going to address this? Am I going to address it where I just go in like a piston and I'm firing all over the place? And by the time I'm done, there's mass casualties everywhere. Or, did I really unpack it? And then more than half the times, almost all the times, when you sit and you unpack it, you realize that, a lot of it is my stuff. And then I'm able to address the issue that's on the table. And then when you bring it to that person, the tone of the confrontation and the conversation is totally different because now they're open.
Well, the other part of it, there's nothing more
Why don't we
inspiring?
We should be.
There's nothing more inspiring than engaging with in a conversation with someone where you say, okay, so I've been sitting and I've been doing some thinking, and this is what I need to take responsibility for before we even get into this. Right? This is what's mine. And when you do that, people are like, oh, Okay. So I'm not saying it, I'm even starting the conversation in my
Mm-hmm.
100% responsibility for what's mine. Right. So I can tell you, Tria, I need to have a conversation with you, but I've been disrupted. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been disrupted because this piece is mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You said something that triggered something in me that has had me in spiral, has had me in thought, has had me in whatever. And I just sit and figure out what was it about what you said that disrupted me. So this is what I need. This is what I figured out. However, this is my request. And
Yeah.
so I got to do my stuff because a lot of times we have conversations about what's ours. When you said this, I had to go and sit and go, holy crap. Why am I so da 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 da? Or why did this? Or why did that? It's my stuff. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm going to say as a real cherry on the on the Sunday for this is that, and someone may want to put this in the comment section. When you get disrupted by something someone says, it's because it has a place to land
Yep.
inside of you. In other words, they have touched something that you have not resolved.
Yeah.
They have touched a soft spot. They have touched a place where you might be insecure. They have touched something.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, that is what it is.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, it's usually a value, we different value.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in conflict because
Yeah.
it's against my value. It's against a belief I hold. Other times we just coming out shooting because they triggered a sore
Yeah.
spot. That's not them. That's us.
Yeah.
That's me. Right? You if you trigger a sore spot, I will come out if I don't do my work and take a moment and breathe. I'm gonna come out firing because I'm reacting to my own insecurity, which you just touched.
Yeah. I was just about to say, it's always work. It's always work to be done, and unpack these things because, like you said, oftentimes that's what it is. That's the real reality of the situation. So how are we going back to once again addressing our own internal conflicts and making those things, right within ourselves before we are out there into the world, or while I shouldn't say before, but while we're out there in the world
Mhm.
interacting and relating, to others.
You
So,
know, that's one of the reasons we say that mindset is a practice. It is not a thing you arrive at. It is a practice, and it is a practice of being aware of your thoughts, emotions, self-talk, communication, and how all that affects your behaviors. It's a practice. And you may be coasting along and then someone says something and you're just like, I gotta go practice. I gotta go do this practice because I'm all disrupted. I'm all bent out of shape.
mhm.
Right?
All right. Okay. Wow. I knew it was going to be a good one. I knew it was going to be a juicy conversation. I'm here all for it. So, unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour. I do see a part two to this because we still have some other things to unpack. So, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Barbara, for all of the wonderful questions and contributions to the conversation this morning. For super achievers who catch this on the replay, if any questions, anything is coming up for you, drop those into the comments because we would definitely love to continue the conversation during the week. So,
And
go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, and Facebook user or users that have been lighting up the conversation. We can't see who you are, but thank you for your amazing comments and questions. This is a juicy topic.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I'm just going to go ahead, Suzanne, and let you close us out with the
Oh, you the
of the week.
quote of the week, Tria. What do you got? What do you got for the quote?
I was just saying, close us out, Suzanne, with the quote of the week, but I got
Yes.
it. Okay, so the quote of the week, the thought of the week is peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. And that's by none other Mahatma Gandhi.
That is amazing. That
Yeah.
like just people just sit with that quote for the day. That is an awesome quote. All right, super achievers. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And as we part, as you know, we'll be back here next week, Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As we part, please know you're brilliant. Know you are oh so very special. And the world is waiting for your unique gifts. Blessings, and we will see you back here next week.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.